You might think you know how to ride a bike, but what if you turned the handlebars left and the wheel went right? A few years ago, Destin Sandlin from Smarter Everyday tried to learn how to ride a bike with reverse steering. It took him 8 months to learn how to ride it 10 feet. His brain literally could not process the change. Why am I telling you this? Because AI is that backward bicycle. It is fundamentally rewriting the rules of business. And now, most organizations are realizing that learning to ride this new technology requires unlearning everything they've done before. If you don't want to crash, and I know you don't, you have to master the art of change. Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Knowhow from Knownwell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. As always, I'm joined by Knownwell CEO David DeWolf, Chief Product and Technology Officer Mohan and Nordlight CEO Pete Buer. We also have a discussion with Tom Davenport, a world-renowned thought leader and author who LinkedIn has named one of its top 10 voices in tech. If you've been with us for a while, you know we've aired more than 100 episodes featuring frontline leaders in AI, executives, founders, authors, and academics. And over the course of those conversations, one constant keeps coming back. Getting the most out of AI isn't a technology problem. It's a people problem. While we're all obsessed with the tech, the winners are the ones focusing on the team. The one thing we need to do successfully in 2026 is orchestrate large-scale change. So we're flipping the script. We're kicking off a brand new 4-part miniseries dedicated entirely to change management. We're going to help you reverse steer that bike so you can drive your company's AI transformation without crashing. But first, Pete Buer joins me to break down some of the latest and greatest in AI news. Hey, Pete, how are you?
I'm good, Courtney. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Pete, just because this is a new year, that doesn't mean we get to stop talking about AI agents. Sorry, everyone. We all know that last year was supposedly the year of the agent, but looking at the data this week, I'm a little confused here, Pete. A new report from G2 says that 57% of companies already have agents in production. But a separate report from Deloitte, released almost at the same time, says the number is only 11%. That is a pretty significant gap. So, Pete, is someone lying here? What's going on? Or are we just bad at math? I mean, I know I'm not the best, but what is the takeaway here? What's going on?
I was told there would be no math. I don't think it's a math problem. I don't think it's a lying problem. I think it's a definitions problem.
Mm,
Team dug in on this one. We learned that the difference between 11% and 57% is a function of defining AI agents differently. And that's a great indication, I think, of overall culturally and from the perspective of a progression where we are with this market, right? We're talking about things using different terms and different definitions. So just to sort of straighten it all out, the reason G2 sees adoption at 57% is that they are counting AI features as agents, which is to say, for instance, if you buy Salesforce or HubSpot and turn on their quote unquote agent feature, G2 counts you as an adopter, a user. It's a relatively low bar, hence the higher number. The reason Deloitte comes in at 11% is that they are measuring enterprise architecture applications. So they're looking for custom built autonomous agents that are rewiring fundamental business processes. So, with the terms kind of straightened out, then, and the data making a little more sense, a couple takeaways from the reports. First, buyer beware, especially if a vendor is trying to sell you something, don't take their stats at face value. There's a big difference between software subscriptions and real transformation. True agentic transformation is still in its early innings. Second, focused on impact. At some level, who cares if the number is 11 or 57 or 99? These are just adoption numbers, and we know that's not the same thing as ROI. Keep your attention first on nailing down the big problems that need to get solved in the business and working through the right mix of solution, whether it be SaaS or enterprise build. What matters most is that you're pursuing the right applications in the right order, creating value for your customers, and staying ahead of the competition. But there's a meta lesson worth considering in all of this, and a little bit back to where we started. Socrates tells us the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. So let's all be Socrates and be more deliberate and specific in our use of language in this developing space. If a tool just answers questions, that's a chatbot, not a true agent. If a tool follows a strict script, that's RPA, not a true agent. If a tool independently reasons and plans and executes across multiple systems, that's a true agent. Let's figure out our lexicon and stick with it.
Pete, this is so helpful. I can't tell you how many times I've been having discussions about agents, and then you're like, "Wait, you're thinking that's an agent? Of course we've been doing that." I'm trying to get into this 11%, not this 57%, but also so helpful if you're having heart palpitations because you're not in yet. Know that bar for 57. Go turn on AI Breeze and HubSpot, and you've met that bar. I think for most of our listeners, knowing 11% is the real marker of what you and I would describe as agents, which you've laid out, which I think is a perfect definition. That's a much higher bar, and very few companies are actually there yet. So you're not behind yet. Pete, so helpful. Thank you as always.
You, Courtney.
You know what makes New Year's resolutions so hard to stick with? It's change. There's nothing about it that's easy. It's often uncomfortable. It can feel like you're walking through quicksand with no clear path to the other side. Fortunately, there's a playbook for change management that will make AI adoption, proliferation, and ultimately transformation easier for your company. I sat down with David and Mohan recently to get their thoughts. David, Mohan, we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about why AI change is so easy. It's so easy. It's just breezy, light. Y'all didn't laugh at that.
Well, it's not very funny because it's not the reality I live in.
That is true. That's right. We spent a lot of time talking about how difficult it is. There's obviously fear, resistance, the chasm between a proof of concept and actually production ready utilizing this new technology. You know, it's a wide gap. So over the next 4 episodes, we're going to talk about how to move beyond all of those blockers and get to what actually works when leaders get AI change right. Because for everybody listening, us included, we're going to have to get good at this. We need this new technology. We see the potential. We've got to get good at leveraging it and executing it, and changing the hearts and minds of the people we lead to actually use it. So, David, let's assume our listeners out there are kind of feeling that new year, new you perspective on thinking about AI in their organizations by getting change management right in 2026. Can you lead us off by just helping us understand where we should start?
So, Court, before we even go to solutioning this challenge, I think I want to go back to what you were itemizing at the beginning of all the reasons why this change is hard. And I want to add one to the table that I think is
Okay.
often overlooked. And what that challenge is AI, when you think about a lot of the solutions, We are moving from what used to be an algorithmic world, right? Deterministic, right? We could do math and we could prove an outcome. We are now moving into the results of this analysis. When you think about an LLM, it's probably the easiest way for most people to think about it. The answer you get back is prose, right? It's not a right or wrong answer of 2 plus 2 equals 4. I can go back and I can quantify that and I can measure it and I can make sure that it's right, right? It is a statement. It is much more nuanced. And all of AI is like that. We are talking about probabilistic technology. And so there is a mindset shift that has to take place as you begin to embrace AI technologies in terms of how the organization leverages them. And they are for the purposes of understanding this nuance and taking action. It's about looking forward. It's about the predictive. It's not about the historical and something that I can prove right or wrong. So I think where a lot of organizations get caught up in the change management beyond the things you talked about, which are very, very true, is also people's mindset still being about, oh, can I prove this or is it right? Right. And I think we have to be really careful. So I just want to posit that before we move forward.
Yeah, that's a really helpful thought process. But it's interesting to me because I just asked Chat GPT to tell me some medical advice for migraines. I didn't even go fact check it. I was just like, cool,
There you
yeah.
go.
I got to
Yeah.
get an IV and something else and something else. Great.
Yeah.
But for some reason, once we cross the bridge, it seems into.
Into a B2B environment. All of a
Yes.
sudden, that's what it is, right? That's what I have witnessed is that standalone individual consumers, when they're looking at someone's stuff, there's this almost blind trust that you're talking about medications and you didn't think twice about
Yeah.
it, right? Like that's kind of mind blowing. But when
Right.
we come to the B2B environment, for some reason, this. It's not even a level of scrutiny, but it's like the polar opposite of what we see on an individual basis in terms of wanting to quote prove it out.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay. So we've got kind of going into this, we know it is hard.
Yeah.
Period. The end. Nobody sitting here at the table thinks this is easy.
Yep.
So, David, as we move into 2026, how do we start thinking about this?
So I think a lot of this is going to ring true to our listeners. Let me just start with a couple of basics. So first and foremost, I think AI goes wrong when we're looking at it as AI or a tool, right? We should not be making business decisions based on a technology. We should be deciding what problem are we trying to solve? What is the outcome we are trying to improve? And when AI is framed as something we should explore or experiment with, we are past that phase, right? It's not about being AI first. It's about actually solving a problem for the business. How do we make better decisions related to X, Y, and Z? How are we going to figure out how to do resource allocation? How are we going to, on and on and on? It's outcomes, it's business purpose, right? Number two, beyond starting with that business level decision of what are we trying to accomplish, I would say, how do we anchor AI into value creation? Like, how do we figure out what is it that we are trying to figure out? There's efficiency plays, there's effectiveness plays, but AI typically is really good at parsing through volumes and volumes and volumes of data to help us make judgments. And those judgments typically lead to better insight that can help us to produce better outcomes, more effectiveness. So, yeah, we can look for the low hanging fruit efficiencies, and we're going to find that, right? If you're a writer, you're going to, but the big needle movers on a B2B, a basis of business, are the ones that help us to not just drive incremental efficiencies out of the P&L, but actually help us to change these high friction workflows and do something different, because it's going to guide us and process volumes of information to help us make better decisions and drive better results. And I think that's the second thing we can do is anchor to that value creation versus just this efficiency theater, so to speak. And then finally, I think the third thing is that one of the most effective signals leaders can send is, here's how I am personally using AI. And be explicit about where it's still rough, and giving the organization the permission to really learn publicly and to leverage it. And when we're talking about some of these big use cases, using it in decision making, for example, let's use it, let's rely on it, but let's be open and honest about where we are in the process and allow it to really help further our discussions, but with the awareness in mind of, hey, this is the first time we're doing this, so we're going to learn as we go along, right? So those are the three things that I would really point to. Is number one, start with a decision, a business decision, focus it on value creation, not just savings to the bottom line. And then number three, be public about where you are in the process as we move away from the experimentation, but we can still recognize that this is a version 1, this is a beta, whatever you want to describe, and we can embrace those things.
Yeah, I love those. The last one especially, it reminds me of my kids because I'm constantly sending them to do new things, going to new places with new people constantly. And then, I have to go to a new workout class with nobody I know. And I'm like, this is, you expect me to get to know these people like by myself? There is something about modeling that is so powerful and
Mm.
showing where it is not easy and where it does work really well, where the outcome really is worth the getting past that rough middle part.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so Mohan, let's get into execution and operating. Can you walk us through kind of the next layer? We've got some good foundational places to start. Where do we go next?
Yeah, to build on what David was saying, this is an operating model change and not a tooling exercise. Right? Fundamentally, leaders have to grapple with that. What that means is, I'll make 3 points, Courtney. One is AI has to be designed for decision augmentation and not for exploration, right? By that, what I mean is the best things about AI are around you treating AI as a destination instead of using it as a signal inside a decision. Right? And they're two different things. And it's a very subtle point. In our world, what this means is AI can be used for signals, but the judgment happens when you create an account plan, when you're doing account reviews, when you're doing pipeline and portfolio discussions, right? AI is a signal within those larger decision frameworks, and that is the best use of AI. And you misplace that as a destination, that's when you make a mistake.
Mm.
The second point is you to assign ownership for outcomes and model behavior, right? So ownership meaning somebody is being accountable not just for adoption, but also how the system behaves when it is wrong, right? You
Hmm.
almost need a product mindset here of saying this is a wonderful technology. It's going to be right a majority of the times, hopefully, and wrong a portion of the time. But who is the owner who is saying, I'm going to manage to the outcomes, and when the system behaves incorrectly, I'm going to own it, and there's going to be a process for that, right? So just being able to look at this more holistically, Courtney, is the second point. And the third is around using fast feedback loops as a lightweight governance, right? So just kind of feedback loops are not niceties, but they're just kind of governance for probabilistic systems, right? And these are all difficult leadership concepts, especially when you're trying to bring in change. But if you can think of this holistically, I think AI is wonderful, and you have to treat AI almost like a product manager. You have to say, what are the clear use cases? What's the iteration? What's the user feedbacks? Ultimately, your employees behave exactly like customers. Right? So you ignore that and the adoption stalls. You really have to drive value and be vulnerable about what works, what doesn't work. But ultimately, this is going to uplift everybody if you use it well. I would say these are like the core hallmarks of what it would take to operationalize an AI technology.
Well, and I'll reiterate, even with our customers, that we've seen when there are real owners in organizations, I mean, it really is, it unlocks another level of success with rolling out AI
That
like ours.
That's so true. It sticks when it's baked into the decision workflows. You don't even know that you're using AI, right? And there is clear ownership because it is in the workflow. That's the best way to bake in AI.
100%. One of the things that I wonder is, as I sit here and listen about all these principles, if it would be helpful to walk through an actual use case. And Mohan, one of the examples that I've been thinking of that would be fun to kick around is, we have had a lot of requests from customers around taking all of the commercial data that we have and starting to really impact one of the highest friction workflows they have is the creation of account plans. And so we are building this agentic platform for really driving what we call the workbench, right, for an account
Yeah.
manager. Right now, they don't have an operating system, but how do you automate the creation of an account plan? Right now, as we start to look at it through this lens that we're talking about, right? I talked about, hey, starting with a business decision, not just a tool. So this isn't driven by, hey, we're looking for a reason for AI. This is, hey, when we talk to leaders in organizations, they say one of the biggest burdens they see that great account plans change the game for their teams, but it's this huge manual lift they have to do. And one of the biggest challenges is not just creating them, but then going through and reviewing them and making them good and teaching the organization how to do that. Well, number one, there you have a business case and is a starting point for successful adoption. Number two, it's anchored on value creation, not just efficiency. So the play here is not just to take the drafting of an account plan and automate it, right? It's actually much bigger than that. Yes, there's a component of that we can do, and we can get 60-70% of the way there, but there's still a human in the loop crafting this and completing it. But it's actually about creating an account plan that is exposed to all of the reality of data, this objective signaling and scoring that we have that fuels a better account plan. So it's not just efficiency, it's actually taking the account plan to the next level because it has more exposure than any individual ever will be in sitting down and writing it. Right. And then when you start to think about the adoption and put my last frame in there around actually admitting where we are, right? It's about, hey, we're doing this with account planning. Nobody's hiding the fact that we're using AI to do this and how it's doing it, but we're going to use this. It's going to create a big lift, but don't expect it to be perfect. And don't question the strategic rationale of whether or not it scored this account perfectly, exactly how I would. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to focus you on areas of improvement and to accelerate the creation of a great plan, right? And so you've got a basis for success there. And then I think we can start to walk into some of the things you were talking about real ownership and feedback loops of how taking that base and putting it into play in a real environment can actually lead to success and drive the outcomes that are there. And I'd love for you to walk through just a couple things how it would apply to that specific use case.
Yeah, that's a really good frame for us to think about this, right? When you do account planning, judgment already happens when you do account planning. It is not that AI is doing the account planning, it's the human that's doing the account planning.
Mhm.
The question is, with AI, can you do better account planning, right? And that is the subtlety that leaders should grapple with. And clearly, AI can surface signals that elevates human judgment to do better account planning, right? So there's a subtle distinction there, Courtney and David, that we need to recognize and then enable the humans to do account planning, but use AI to do better account planning.
I love that.
It still makes me go all the way back to the very beginning of this episode, David, when you brought up your teams, everybody has to understand this technology and how it is different. These account plans are not going to be 100% perfect. It's not deterministic, and it's different. And if you go into it thinking this is going to be 100% correct and you find a 1% error and you're like, throw this baby out, it's
Well, and
wrong.
and look at that example. Like, that is true no matter how you create an account plan, right? What you look at an account
True.
plan and see, and what I look at and what Mohan looks at, all very different. None of us are right or wrong, right? But there is rationale and reasoning that goes into how we think about account plans that none of us, if we sat down, okay, write your account plan, none of us would come up with the exact same one as somebody
True.
else. And so
Yeah.
to approach that problem as a right or wrong thing and to blame the AI, I totally hear you. There could be an error in there, yes, but just that frame of reference doesn't even work for it when you remove the AI and think about it from a human to human perspective.
Yeah. It's a great point. Well, David, Mohan, anything to add on this first episode of our 4-part series on change management? I think these are some really good principles to kind of set up our next set of conversations. But anything else you would add here?
I'd just say that leaders should stop asking their people to adopt AI and instead focus on redesigning how decisions are made, the workflows in their company, and the accountability for actual operations. Right. So that's what I would say. It's a shift from AI to real decision making and better decision making.
Well said. I'll just plus one that.
Yeah. Perfect. David, Mohan, thank you as always. You know, one thing that makes change management easier? Having intelligence that actually solves a problem that you need to act on. That's what Knownwell provides for professional services leaders looking to drive net revenue retention and client satisfaction. Our 30-day trial lets you see exactly how Knownwell supports your growth and retention targets. You can get started at knownwell.com/30 days today for a free trial. No credit card, no commitment, just the commercial intelligence you need to drive your business forward. Tom Davenport is a world-renowned thought leader and author who has co-authored 25 books and more than 300 articles to help organizations transform their business practices in digital business domains. He is the President's Distinguished Professor of Information Technology and Management at Babson College, a fellow of the MIT Center for Digital Business, and an independent senior advisor to Deloitte's Chief Data and Analytics Officer program. Tom has been named a top 10 voice in tech by LinkedIn, among a number of other accolades. And he sat down recently with Pete Buer to talk about how to connect traditional change management with AI-driven transformation. The conversation was so robust, we're bringing you part 1 this week and part 2 next week.
Tom, welcome. We're so delighted to have such an august personality on the program.
When will that person be arriving?
He's with us right now. Tom, so you began your career focused on business process redesign and knowledge management. And for a decade now, you've been writing about enterprise scale AI adoption. How would you describe the evolution of your thinking with the introduction of AI into the whole transformation methodology and philosophy?
Well, it may be a function of my limited imagination, but I keep going back to some of those earlier ideas that I promulgated with the idea that AI can really help with them in terms of business process reengineering. I think there's a great opportunity to use AI to change your business processes and to enable new ways of doing work. And I also have done work in the past on knowledge management, and clearly generative AI is useful for that purpose. So I'm trying to sort of retread those old ideas, I guess, with an AI approach. Also, trying some new ideas relative to AI, as of course, but and even I wrote a book a couple of years ago called All In on AI, which is about companies that are really aggressive in their use of AI. And I'd previously written a book called Competing on Analytics, which is about companies that are really aggressive in their use of analytics. So there are only so many new ideas under the sun, I guess. So I feel obligated to use some of the old ones sometimes.
So do I interpret from that response that in the same way that other forces, be they technology or market change or customer change, drive a need for business transformation, AI is just the next in a list of influences causing us to pull out best practice in change management?
Well, I think it's more substantial and powerful than some of the ones that came before.
Yep.
Um, But when I first started working on business process reengineering or innovation, I think I was trying to refer to it at the time, largely unsuccessful in getting the world to use that term. The technologies of the time were really the internet, which is also a pretty important one, and these large scale enterprise transaction systems, which are boring but also important. So I I think AI has the potential to be more transformative, but it takes a while for these large scale organizational transformations to happen. The technology moves a lot faster than the organizational adoption does.
That was where I was going to go next. Like, I think that question was delivered on the assumption that, in fact, AI is somehow different. What kind of monkey wrenches does AI throw into the machinery when you are trying to help a business to adopt and transform?
Well, not much except that it offers the possibility of totally eliminating humans from organizations. So,
Just that little consideration.
nothing important. Um, I think, there are different opportunities from different forms of AI, and I'm a big believer in kind of a Big Ten approach to AI, including what I call analytical AI, which some people want to refer to it as some sort of traditional or classical AI, which I think kind of diminishes its role, makes it sound overly historical. And even some of the more deterministic AI approaches involving rules and so on still, I think, have a place. But for analytical AI, it's much more oriented to decision making and prediction of what's going to happen, and in some cases, optimization of your resources. And that clearly, we it's as a real opportunity for making organizations more efficient and effective. And then generative AI, of course, it's primarily oriented to creating content, and that ends up having a huge effect on content intensive businesses like professional services, but also, content oriented activities by knowledge workers, which was another topic I've been interested in for a long time. I wrote a book, didn't sell very many of them, about knowledge workers, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, called Thinking for a Living. Still available if anybody wants to buy it. So,
I'm on it. Tom, you mentioned this, I think, discounted concern around the notion of humans being eliminated in the process. At some level, we owe it to shareholders to become more efficient. And at some level, we owe it to humans to figure out the path forward for work. How thoughtful are companies being about the balance between those two?
well, not thoughtful enough, I think it's fair to say, in that, well, first of all, it's a hard problem because we don't know exactly what AI can even do today, well, much less what it's going to be able to do in the future. And so the design of work and figuring out what's going to be done by a machine and what's going to be done by a human is a quite difficult assignment, particularly, looking ahead for a few years. There are a lot of organizations that are talking about upskilling, but not that many actually doing it seriously, in part as I say, because it's hard to know exactly what skills are going to be relevant. At one point, we thought, oh, prompt engineering is going to be the job of the future. And now we realize that's going to be done largely by machines as well. It's going to suggest prompts to us if it thinks we're doing a bad job of it. It's already doing that to some degree. So I think it's tough. But if you judge by actions rather than kind of thoughts and words, most companies, I think, have decided that we are doing augmentation for the time being rather than large scale automation, which I think is the right answer. And you do have a number of company leaders, CEOs, saying, "Oh, we're going to need half the knowledge workers in the future that we have today," which I think is really dumb, frankly, because A, we don't know exactly how many we're going to need, and B, there's no better way to demoralize your employees than saying, "We don't know which ones of you are going to go, but half of you will not be here in the future." Um, it's not a good way to inspire loyalty among knowledge workforce.
We've touched on this on other episodes, but the person I feel for, maybe more than anyone else in the C-suite right now, is the head of HR. Like, how on earth do you do workforce planning?
Right, really, really tough job, and I think they were slow to realize that this was going to hit them in a big way, and many of them are not that knowledgeable about technology and AI. More and more are, I think. But it's interesting. I was in Korea last week talking to a bunch of Korean leaders, and they really wanted me to focus on good examples of AI leadership. And one of the people that I mentioned was this woman, Lena Nair, who was at one point the chief HR officer of Unilever. And she, I think, did an excellent job of starting to prepare people for AI driven transformation and telling them that we don't know exactly what you're going to do in the future, but we're going to provide you with as many resources as possible that you can use as you figure out what you may want to do and how it relates to AI. Um, and then as a result, she became a CEO, and now she's the CEO of Chanel. And so I think those CHROs who really figure this out and try to make some strides toward how it's addressed in organizational transformation have a very bright future, but there aren't very many of them who are really taking the lead in that regard.
As you make your rounds and talk to business leaders about transformation driven by AI, do you find that there's still major pockets of resistance in the organization? I remember when we first started having these conversations maybe 2 years ago now, it was tough to get the sales force to pay attention, and HR had great anxiety. And you could go list by list, seat by seat around the C-suite and kind of have a bit of a dark interpretation of what the future held because there were such pockets of resistance. Is that the case? Have we played with it long enough that people are up for it?
I think it's really quite variable in that regard. I think there's still a lot of people who are hoping this will go away or that they'll retire before they have to really deal with it. Um, and, in some ways, history is on their side. As I say, these large scale organizational transformations take a while. And most of the companies that have started to lay off people, so actually reminiscent of what they did in business process reengineering, they're saying, "Oh, we're going to be getting rid of 30,000 people, and AI is a big factor in this." But it's not really that they know exactly how many people they're going to need or how many are going to be replaced by AI. They're just using it as an excuse to get rid of lots of people. Um, and that it may be that AI starts taking on work fast enough to take on the work of 30,000 people in the case of Amazon or whatever. But I think it's much smarter to say, we're not really sure what's going to happen with AI. So we're not going to be hiring quite as many people as we have in the past, or we'll shrink by attrition a little bit or whatever.
How about in those places where resistance still exists, people whistling past the graveyard or hoping to retire or whatever? Have you observed sort of like best practice, like what really turns people's heads, gets them on board?
Well, I think there's always a lot to be said for senior management pronouncements that AI is really critical to our future. And if you want to hang around this organization, you might want to learn something about it and think about how it affects your job. I think Doug McMillan at Walmart said he thought that every job, including the Walmart store greeter, was going to be affected by AI. So that provides some motivation. They didn't lay off a ton of people yet, but they tried to motivate people to learn. I think letting people know about the educational options. We probably need some little AI programs to help people think about what it means for their job in a sense. Nobody, as I say, nobody really knows the answer to that, but it might start to suggest some areas where you may want to improve your skills. Um, right now, it's sort of general digital capability. Organizations are saying is a good thing. Yes, it is, but that's just a start. I think um, critical thinking, we don't know very much about how to inculcate critical thinking in organizations and people, but there's not much doubt that um, it's a useful thing, at least at the moment, when we really need to be reviewing the outputs of generative AI and making sure it makes sense and it's not hallucinating and it's not boring and so on.
It almost feels like there's a market, and maybe it's already building on its own out there around sort of AI tools to help drive AI transformation.
Yeah, well, particularly since I think it will be very individualized and personalized what transformations and new skills are necessary. And AI is pretty good at that sort of thing, at personalizing. I haven't actually seen companies using it much, but it seems like a no-brainer to me.
Thanks as always for listening and watching. Don't forget to give us a 5-star rating on your podcast player of choice. As always, we'd really appreciate it if you can leave us a review or share this podcast with someone you know will enjoy it. At the end of every episode, we'd like to ask one of our AI friends to weigh in on the topic at hand. Hey, ChatGPT, how you doing? This episode, we're giving leaders a practical playbook for leading through AI change. If you were writing a chapter, what would you focus on?
I'd focus on helping leaders build judgment, not just tools. How to decide what to automate, what to protect, and where humans still matter most. The real chapter is about leading people through uncertainty while the tech keeps changing under your feet.
And now, you're in the know. Thanks as always for listening or watching. We'll see you next week with the next episode in this series on change management.
Hey, if you made it this far in the episode, first of all, thank you. And second, we know that AI is changing all the time, and so we've got you covered. Here is another great episode for you to watch to stay in the loop on what's happening in AI and business. And second of all, we'd love for you to subscribe. You can do that right here. I've always wanted to do that, by the way. So do that now. That would be great.